Hi, I'm Chris from Airwindows. I am doing a recording in the middle of a heat wave and using video lights, so I'm going to want to keep this somewhat abbreviated, but I have a new plugin, as you might well imagine, and it is called Mojo. I'm going to be comparing it to 80 Clip 7 some of the time. And you might well ask, what on earth is Mojo? Well, I can show you. If I play music and set it to 0, Mojo sounds like this. You'll notice it inflated stuff a little bit. This is the first fruit of something that I did trying to do a new version of Channel. Namely, I was trying to work out how to have the fullness of channel 5 or 4, which I need to be working on organizing all the plugins and making it possible to figure out which one we're talking about. That has been brought to my attention recently, so that's going to become one of my jobs coming up pretty soon. But even though my job is going to be organizing the large numbers of plugins, I'm still bringing another one here. And you might enjoy this because it can do this. And this. That's right, Mojo is a kind of loudinator, but really what it is another fundamental kind of algorithm, sort of like the sine wave algorithm in density, or spiral, which is a variation on that. So Mojo is a variation on spiral that brings back some of the fullness and bigness to the sound. Rather than being more spiral has transparency, but it's lacking that sort of fullness and thickness to the sound. Mojo is kind of all about having extra fullness and thickness to the sound. We can have it more or less at unity gain, and then it gets a little bit more full sounding. And it's also going to sort of accentuate bass. Now, by contrast, I can show you 80 Clip 7, which is a earlier plugin, and it does more sophisticated things, including having the mode thing, which looks different on VST, but it's still there. And if you do the same thing in 80 Clip, you get this. No change. Nothing happened. With Mojo, things are a little bigger. But when we start boosting things is when Mojo starts really showing off what it's about. We've got this gain thing. This is in dB. And what we'll do first is go into 80 Clip and boost into that. There is the bit shift gain on the monitoring, making it so that you're not blowing your ears up. And as you can see, we can add a certain amount of crunch, and it gets that much louder. But depending upon what you're doing with it, like low frequencies can create some artifacts and stuff because it's essentially a kind of clipper. Well, Mojo is still what they call a transfer function, which is it's changing the shape of how the sound gets louder and quieter. And like the density function, it smooths off as you get louder, but it has a more complicated curve than that. It's an algorithm that is sort of more sophisticated than some of those other ones. And we get this 80 Clip could be pushed until it kind of crunches. scrolled back, and you can see that we were able to do 7.41 dB of gain using AD clip. It's not really designed for smashing stuff in too much of a way. Remember, I have NC17, which was always designed for smashing things more aggressively. Well, now we've got Mojo, which is more recent. And this shows you kind of what Mojo is about. The way that it's working is it's expanding the sound outwards and making it fill up sort of more space. And it's adding this kind of bassy bloatedness, this thickness that you wouldn't necessarily always want on everything, but it's adding that when stuff starts getting distorted. And it sounds like that. So again, AD clip, then Mojo. You can tell it's kind of rounder sounding. And of course, so that is really aggressively loud sounding. So we can also do that on things like drum recording. And again, it's not an EQ, but what it's going to do is smooth stuff out in an interesting way. And I can also show you the comparison between that and AD clip. If I do AD clip, it sounds like this. You can hear the sort of low frequency fill in there. That's part of AD clip's special thing. But you can also tell that there are artifacts and strangenesses going on, whereas that's more mid-rangey, and it's not adding the artificial bass fill, but there's a certain kind of softness to it, and it's very well suited to stuff like obnoxious rock music. For instance, this thing called Nothing Nowhere. Raw sound. Then so when we do that, we can sort of hear a bit more low end swinging in because of the way that Mojo's kind of soft distortion. It's a soft distortion that brings in that mid bass that was in density that Spiral loses, still applies a kind of Spiral like manipulation of the curve, and then it starts rounding off faster and faster as you get to the top, and in fact rolls over. If you run a sine wave through it, what you get is a super curved edge, flat-topped square wave. And you can push into that fairly hard, and it will start to do a wave folding behavior where it starts to dip in at the top of this square wave when you push really, really hard into it. But compared with stuff like just a sine calculation, there's a lot going on there. You can push much harder before it shows up. And you can hear that. Like with that raw sound, and then it starts getting super loud. So Mojo is a number of things. One of the things it is another raw material algorithm that I can build other stuff out of. And that's important because, for instance, popular plugins like iron oxide are built out of a number of different things, including a stage of the density algorithm, as a kind of final soft clip. So in cases like that, I can use something like Spiral, or the opposite, something like Mojo that has even more kind of bloaty fatness and thickness to the sound. And that gives more range of adaptation for designing stuff out of. It's also, since it's a very simple algorithm, it's about a line of code or so. And that means people using the MIT licensed open source code can take this, and as long as they credit me, they can use that in their own stuff. So other people get to choose between fundamental things like a sine algorithm and Spiral and Mojo as well. But since people typically don't tend to do that, I find that, I've got like the website BeatDruid where people can make their own explanations of how Airwindows plugins work, and mostly people haven't really done an organized version of that. And the open source stuff allows people to take little tiny chunks that are neatly separated out and incorporate it into their own things. And although there have been some exceptions, mostly people aren't doing that. So I have to. There's been a lot of talk about subscriptions lately. There's been a lot of stuff going on in the plugin world about increasing numbers of people getting into subscriptions. And Airwindows is kind of like a subscription. If you would have bought this plugin for $50, perpetual license, and lifetime support, my lifetime, not yours. If I die, you're out of luck. And also you get the source. If $50 sounds like and also you get to install it on all of your computers. If $50 sounds good as far as the cost of something like that, and you find this particular plugin useful, what you should do is go to my Patreon and add another $50 to what you had there. Or if you're not on Patreon, then please join. You don't even have to do $50 a year. You could do $1 a month. But it's the statistical nature of that makes it be helpful. Because the more people get involved with something like that, the more predictable like my pay for this kind of thing is. Otherwise, I would be motivated to need to do like special tape API SSL Neve Mojo plugin 2019. And I would be increasingly pressured to come up with stuff that just sounded really good so that people would pay me. And I need to be doing the Patreon. I get that I use this as an argument for doing that, and it doesn't apply to everybody. But for me, being supported by the Patreon means I get to work on stuff that I think is useful, rather than just what I think is going to immediately sell to the largest number of people. And that does mean getting to do plugins like Mojo, or, for instance, Curve. Curve was very simple. Curve came out. It is lowercase, as always, and I've been using it on all of the videos, microphone recordings, so that if I go loud or clip things, what Curve kicks in and turns it down just a little bit. It balances with other things better. And it's this nice little sort of sometimes loud microphone capture governor. And you can't really tell that it's doing a compression thing. I don't think anybody would have noticed that Curve has existed on a bunch of my recent videos on the mic if I didn't tell you. And what use is a compression-like plugin where it doesn't have a control, it doesn't have a boost, and you can't tell whether it's on? Well, it's being useful to me. And it might be useful to you. And if it has special usefulness with its ability to, just put it on and forget it, or put it on in something like ScreenFlow, for instance, which I use for the videos that can't actually support audio units with interfaces because they break. Something like that could end up useful even though it's a hard sell in a commercial environment. By the same token, honestly, anything where you can do this That's Mojo. This is the raw sound. So you get to smash the volume this hard with Mojo, and there is one simple volume control, and I think for many people it will beat 80 clip, which is why I keep doing this work. It's like the stuff that I used to do isn't always the best anymore. It will be for some cases, but in this case, it's possible that people looking for just sheer loudination might get more Mojo out of Mojo than out of my previous solutions. And yeah, this one could potentially be a big hit plugin, but the point is it didn't have to be, and I didn't design it with the intention of making the biggest loudinator anybody's ever heard. What I made it for was to do a spiral, but with more sort of mid-range thickness and fatness than spiral has, because spiral can be considered to be too clean sometimes. It doesn't have the fullness that some lesser plugins have, and that's what I was trying to do. I wasn't trying to do the new loudinator of the gods. Instead, I just did my best with what I was doing, and I came out with Mojo. Look at how loud that frickin' is. Actually, you don't have to look. That's Mojo. If you like Mojo, please jump on the Patreon. It's great to be able to keep doing this kind of stuff, and it's also great to be able to discover stuff like this when I wasn't actually intending to do that exact thing. I got more stuff coming along, and I've got a lot of work to do, and one of the things that I must do is organize everything so you can find stuff that you need. Hopefully this one's going to be memorable enough that you'll be able to find it. So with that, have fun with Mojo, and I'll talk to you later.